Hello and welcome to the Enquiry podcast. This is a place where we are going to dive into everything that it is to live your life as medicine. So, how to follow the breadcrumbs and the signposts in order to be guided to your purpose and to your freedom. How to use your life's challenges as the opportunities that they are for your own healing and growth. My name is Nerida Mills. I am your host. I am a psychosomatic practitioner. I am a coach, and I am absolutely thrilled to be here. I am very excited to get this party started. So let's get going. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Enquiry podcast. I am very excited today to have Jaime Duff joining me on the podcast and moving into an inquiry as to his life experience and the medicine that it's brought along the way. So welcome, Jaime.
Thank you, Nerida. Thank you for having me. It's been a long time in the making, and I'm just stoked to be having this conversation.
Yep, same. So what I would love to kick off with is what is your passion and what do you feel like you're here for? Straight in the deep end, mate.
Look, for me, the most significant moments of my life have been those in transformation. So whether it be my own personal transformation and being in the room where I'm being broken through and I've seen the world differently and my world changes, or I've been across from someone, say, running a festival and I've got 130 men around me and I'm providing a breakthrough moment for someone else. And you see the moment that they shift and that everyone around them physically shifts in the circle, and then their life shifts around that and everyone shifts around them. So I truly believe that I'm here to facilitate transformation on that level and have been sort of building towards the precipice of really launching into that over the last few years. And it's more and more aligned. The more it's everything I think about, it's everything I speak about, it's everything I be about is the power of transformation and how it can happen in such a short amount of time and how much of an impact it can have on our lives. So that's what I'm passionate about. That's what I love. That's what I'm inspired by.
Beautiful. And so within your own life experience, what led you down the path of seeking transformation? What was it for you that was the nudge / bitch slap from the universe that enforced, depending on your story, that enforced this path for you?
Yeah, well, how far back do you want me to go?
As far back as true for you, yeah.
I think I've heard you use the terminology before, the rug pull moment, which is like, I guess my family separated when I was quite young, which as you know, as a child, particularly before the age of 7 years old, creates a bit of a divide in the psyche, right? Is that there's kind of a gap where I'm not good enough, and that kind of story played out in my relationships. It played out in my finances. It played out in my career pursuits. It basically played out like everywhere in my life until sort of like late 20s, early 30s, when things started to shift, and I started to, I guess, I always knew there was something more. I always knew there was a greater path. I was raised in quite a spiritual household, but with a very strong engineering mind, and getting into engineering in my early 20s, a lot of that was kind of suppressed and pushed aside. And with the help of many of us in that age of our life is drugs and alcohol and going out and partying and, chasing meaningless connections. And yeah, like I said, that sort of continued that pattern of like, not good enough, gonna numb it down, gonna think my way out of it, gonna control my way out of it with thoughts and critical thinking and my engineering skill. And it kind of all came to this precipice in 2015 was kind of the big shift for me. I was traveling with a friend through Southeast Asia, and I'd done my normal pattern, have a bunch of drinks, disappear, chasing off after a woman. And this is a good friend of mine. We've been friends at this point for about 11 years. And he called me out on it. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and it triggered something in me. It was this judgment that he passed upon me, which is obviously my own shit. I don't hold that against him for any reason. But it really, like, I really got my heckles up. He was like, basically, it felt like he was having a go at me for my pattern and what I was doing, and that's when something really pinched a nerve in me. And I found myself downstairs at this hostel in the middle of Cambodia, having my first panic attack. I was lying on the floor at 3 o'clock in the morning. Everything's dark. There's no one else around. There's kind of this, this open air pagoda hostel receptions as Southeast Asia does. And I found the whole world was just closing in on me. Like I had actually really had no idea what was going on. I had no idea about breathwork and psychosomatics back at this point. It was about 10 years ago. And everything just started collapsing on me. And I felt like I was dying. I felt like I was going to pass out. And it wasn't until later that I worked out that I was having my first panic attack. And that, for me, that was the wake up call. That was the rug pull moment where it says, "Hey, Jamie, you're a beautiful place in the world. You've got some amazing people around you, but for some reason, there's something blocking you from experiencing life to the fullest and to being your full self." And the next day, I woke up and a friend of mine sent me a video. It was an 11-minute TED talk on YouTube by Tony Robbins, and that video changed my life. That was basically, "Here, Jamie, this is why you're doing what you're doing. Here's the 6 reasons you're pursuing everything you're pursuing, and here's how to do it in a more higher and aligned fashion." Just in that 11-minute video, and I remember that sort of I just jumped off the cliff at that point. I was just like, I'm in, psychology. I'd already had a bit of interest in physiology because I'd been going to the gym for a couple of years by this point, but sort of started to connect the dots between the way we think and how our body works, and became really deeply interested in philosophy and why we do what we do and why we're here, and started asking those primordial questions that you do around that sort of mid to late 20s age. And yeah, and that was great for a few years. And until I found myself with more freedom, more time, and more money, and more support than I ever thought I had in my life. I just quit my job and sailed off in the sunset with a woman, and I'd never been more lost in my whole life. And that is when I encountered my first coach, and through, I guess, what I call just little baby steps compared to what both you and I facilitate now and have experienced. He completely flipped my life upside down in the space of 8 weeks. I remember one thing he did. He just drew a dot on a piece of paper and he held it up to the screen. We were doing this over Zoom. I was in the UK at the time, and he was in my idyllic location in Bali. And he held this dot up to the screen. He said, "Jamie, what can you see?" I said, "Well, I can only see the dot." He said, "Okay, I'm going to hold it back here now. And what can you see?" "Well, I can see everything else around, and I can see the dot." And he's like, "Well, and even that was just a shift in perspective for me, where I saw the world differently. And from that, I knew that I had an obligation and something to give, and I guess a moral obligation within myself to give that back and to start sharing all that knowledge that I amassed over 4 years. And here I am now, 10 years in, from that journey, from that shift, and helping others to shift and see the world differently as well. So,
I think, there's a couple of pieces of your story that I want to highlight because I think it's so fascinating, right? One is that as soon as you became aware of the problem, the solution presented itself, which is phenomenal. And I think that's often the case, right? When we're open to the solution, once we're really clear on the problem, the solution and our dedication to the solving it, the solution then makes itself known. It was always there, right? It's just literally waiting for us to open the fucking door. Okay, here you go. And the other part is the piece that you said around, in that early stage with coaching, it was some of the most basic fundamental shifts of your perception that had such a big difference. And I think that people can, especially when you've been in the transformation space for a while, people can discount the power of the small step because, the transformation or the transformational experience can be so mind-blowing that it in and of itself becomes a new addiction cycle, right? And it's sort of like we're just constantly chasing this next transformation, the next transformation, the next transformation, which is just a new level of awareness. But without those small steps of perception shift and implementation, that big transformation or the opening to the transformation isn't able to actually complete the cycle. I think it's that balancing point between the two, much like your balancing point between your engineering mind and now being able to channel that into the balance of the spirituality and everything else that you were raised around. It's very, very interesting. how
Mm.
how our stories bring us back into this point of equanimity.
Yeah, it's and you actually just touched on something really interesting because I've found, in my 10 years in studying this is that there's almost two distinct components of transformation. One is the breakthrough, but one is the consistent effort over time that helps you consistently shift and integrate that reality. Not only, well, there's almost like there's a preparation over time
Mm.
to bring you towards a breakthrough. Then there's the breakthrough, and then there's like that hand holding, and that's why the coaching that you and I do is so valuable because it's people are going to the seminars, they're going to the retreats, they're going to the festivals, they're having this fist pumping moment, but things aren't actually changing for them. And that's because they either weren't prepared at the start or they aren't prepared for the integration process and they aren't doing that ongoing work over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Application is everything. This is one of the things that I'm like, I hound anybody who works with me. There's no, the challenge with not applying, in my experience and what I've seen for people, when you know and you don't apply, your mental health actually goes downward. It's like the spiral that can take you up drags you down because like the level of pain in which the universe needs to apply in order to get you to move, you've just upped it. You've literally just brought into a higher point of pain required in order to get you to move. And I've seen people really become quite tortured in their own experience because they have awareness and they don't do anything with it. So it's so important. The things that I'm most passionate about because I've seen people crumble in that.
Yeah, I was explaining to a friend recently that you can almost reach a point of constipation as well when you're taking in so much information and you're not feeding it out or integrating it into your life or actioning it in your life. You can actually get blocked up and you become almost contracted into that ball of information where you could actually be supporting and helping people, but you've amassed so much that you can't actually pass it through your system.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way. I like the analogy because then you're just full of shit.
Yeah, yeah,
I like
exactly.
it. That's brilliant. And I mean, a lot of your work, as you've kind of spoken into, is predominantly with men now. Obviously, your lived experiences as a man. I would love to hear your perception around the rebalancing that I see in our society at the moment in regards to men and men reclaiming their power after the recalibration of women claiming power. And it's sort of like it's been in my perception anyway, it's been this process of women feeling very disempowered and men having a lot of control, and then women reclaiming that control, kind of pendulum swinging to the opposite degree of making men bad and wrong and all of these things, and now coming into this, ideally, hopefully we hit a balance point in it, but there's the process that's happening, right? Like where both men and women are having to relearn what it is to be in partnership with one another and just to be ourselves. And obviously I've got the experience and the perception of woman. I would love to hear your experience and perception as man in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually so funny you mentioned because when I mentioned that, the family split, it was my mum and my two older sisters who are actually a fair bit older than me, moved to Australia. So I always tout that I was prominently raised by three women. That was that was the thing, right? So I've always been very comfortable in that environment. And the funny thing is that although I haven't really niched down on a particular male or female yet, a lot of the clients that gravitate towards me are actually women. And because there is a call, I've done a lot of work with men, and as you know, we've run the festival and we've done courses and we've done that stuff over the years. And I feel there is a desire for women to have structure and order around what they want to create and provide that safe channel, because a lot of women, like you say, some of the men haven't risen yet or don't know how to rise. So the women are like, okay, well, how do I don't have the safety and structure in my relationship or at home, or I can't find a man that's like that. And then but I want to create these things. So I'm finding I'm actually working with probably more women than men at the moment, which is, yeah, just an interesting,
Not surprising. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it is an interesting thing, right? Because I talk about the riverbanks, right? In order to, we have an ocean, which is our vision and our highest dreams and aspirations. And in order to get to the ocean, if it rains on the land, without the riverbanks, the water is just going to evaporate and dissipate back into the cycle.
Mm.
And the riverbanks for me is the structure. It's your values. It's your daily non-negotiables. What you do every day in order for that water to channel and flow towards the ocean, which we want to create. And yeah, it's for me the work. And I used to do a lot of stuff around the masculine and feminine and the men rising. And I've actually sort of took a step back from that work, because what I started to notice in the industry, and this can be somewhat controversial, but there's a lot of spaces, particularly like the men's circles space, where people are perpetuating their stories.
Mm.
I've seen those men. Don't get me wrong. I've seen those men's circles change lives, absolutely save lives. I've seen men that were suicidal that step into that, the circle of brothers on a Saturday morning and jump into the ocean with us, and they're like, man, if I didn't have this, I wouldn't be here next week.
Mm.
But also there is a tendency to have that space where it's perpetuated, where rather than actually calling people on their bullshit and saying, hey, that's just a story, let's clear that. There's a perpetuation. So I guess for me, this is why the work for me is not so much around let's work with men, let's work with women, let's work with masculine, let's work with feminine. Everything is about teaching everyone that they're the center of their own universe, and that they are the most important person in their lives. And when they love themselves on a deeper and more intimate level, then they allow the love from others, and then they allow more love in from people, and they allow themselves, I guess, to have more of a capacity to love, because they just continue to return inward.
Of course. Yeah. Well, and the degree at which we can experience any emotion inside of ourselves is the degree at which we can give that emotion or hold space for that emotion outside of ourselves, right? Equal measures.
Exactly. And I think there's there can be a tendency as well to get caught in, I guess, the global social, men and women rising and things like that. And when I work with people, I'm like, well, let's just forget about all that, and what's true to you, and what do you want to create, and what, because I find particularly women, most of the time they're putting their family first.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, well, you're first, because then you can support your family. And men are either just putting it away altogether and just distracting, or destroying their own sort of habits and addictions as well. They're feeding their own addictions. But yeah, bringing them back within, and I'm sure this is a strong vein for your work as well, is a big part of what I like to teach, and just showing people that they're the problem, but they're also the solution as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important distinction, right? Yes, you are creating the pains out of protection. And you also have the capacity to create all of the pleasure. Like if you could fuck up your life so bad, imagine what you can create if you channel it in the right way. Like that's one of the things I'd like to come back to. And so you touched on addiction, and I'm quite passionate about addiction. My kid's dad struggled with addiction our entire relationship, so I've got a decent lived experience of being on the other side of an intense addiction experience. And obviously I've got my own addictions, right? We all have our addictions. The degree to which they play out, the resourcefulness to which they play out, is varied. But I would love to hear your experience, your perception around addiction, and what actually drives an addiction of an unresourceful expression versus what you find drives the addiction of a resourceful expression. So how do people go from, what's the driver when we're seeing ourselves playing out a behavior that we know is causing us harm, or that we're getting the feedback that it's causing our harm and our relationship harm? And then because I think, the idea of just removing addictions is delusional. in my opinion. Like, you're going to have addictions. The choice, the decision point is, what addictions do you choose to have and what drives those addictions, right? So from that point, what do you notice the flip is when people are able to move that addiction into a healthy expression? I mean, you've had this you've lived this experience yourself. So yeah, I'll leave it to you. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And there's this whole thing about healing addiction, but the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your addictions, right? And I remember I did an interesting post on this a little while ago, and I said, like, drugs are an addiction, junk food's an addiction, but also watching sports an addiction, or going running is an addiction. And so people got quite triggered. Oh, what do you mean sport is like an addiction? It's like, no, it's like it's
Compulsion.
it's maybe better than something else, or
Yeah.
but playing sport might be better because you're outside and you're doing something like you're like terminology there about like resourceful. Is it actually helping you move the needle forward, or is it keeping you where you are, or moving you quote unquote backwards? That's the conversation. Backwards, forwards.
Yeah.
It's helping. Everything's moving towards the same thing. But for me, yeah, it's there's a beautiful analogy in the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, where he talks about the identity onion. And it's like, who are you at your core? And we have the things going on the outside, but who are you on the inside? And transformation happens when you change your identity, when you shift. And that's sort of like my process, where it's like shifting the identity. And it doesn't become I go for a run every day and I eat healthy. I'm just someone who just happens to eat healthy because it's just part of who I am, and it's part of my entire genetic makeup. And yeah, it probably is some kind of addiction, because if I don't get if I have to eat unhealthy food for a period of time, or drink, God forbid, tap water for a day, it really throws me off.
It's nasty.
Yeah, if anyone's going to take anything from this conversation, please
drink tap water.
Drink good quality water. It's like $30 for a jug. No, so yeah, look, I completely agree. And when we can shift our habits over time so they just become part of our identity, then that's when I feel things really change. And that's, when I work with my clients, we have non-negotiables. It's like, what are the 3 to 6 things you do every day that you're committed to, that over time are just going to become the kind of person that just does 30 minutes of walking, that just does push-ups a day, that just eat healthy, because then it becomes almost effortless. It just becomes part of who you are. So I feel that, yeah, the key is, but those, I guess it's important to say, those non-negotiables are born from the vision. What is it you're creating, and what's going to get you there? Because a big part of what I do is like, I don't want to be constantly living in the future of the vision of what we're creating in the future, because then if you got your eyes forward, you got no eyes on the present and where you're going currently. So it's kind of like, okay, let's look at the vision and break that down into, how do you live your life and create your lifestyle in a way that simply by living it, you're creating the life you want to create. And if you can be consistent with that, I had a client message me the other day. He said, "Oh, I've done 5 of my 6, and I did some walking, but I didn't do the gym stuff." And I was like, "Cool, start again, 30 days, let's go." And you just it's got to set in. And once you can set that in to become a part of who you are, the other addictions kind of become less important or easier to shift. I find the ones that are less resourceful.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the unresourceful addictions come from not really knowing what it is that you particularly want, or how to create it, or lacking the commitment to creating it in your experience. And then having those things really helps you to be able to formulate a new identity based on outcome versus if we look at outcome as future paced, obviously the opposite to that is past focused, right? So if we're constantly focusing in on the past, our perception of past hurts or past betrayals or past shame or past whatever, right, story of who we've been, when we're focusing on that drives more so the unresourceful behavior that is self-punishing and self-protecting in a way, both simultaneously. And by being clear on the outcome that you're looking for and having a dedication to the small things in your life that you are committed to, that will naturally formulate that outcome that really shifts that that addiction cycle. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's another thing I'll add there is that the a lot of people look at addictions like distractions, right? Like social media, and you summarized it and you nailed it really, like where people aren't connected to what they're here to do, so they're distracted. And distraction just means a lack of traction, right? Like traction. So we have a lack of traction towards what it is we want to create in life. And in order to shift that addiction, you either need to be making traction or at least feel like you're making traction.
Love that play on words. That's really powerful. Distraction, a lack of traction. Get into action. Get into action. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Very, very cool. Amazing. So, look, you die tomorrow, right? Hopefully not, but let's just put it out there. If you die tomorrow, what would be the message that you would like to leave this planet with? What do you want people to know?
Look, apart from drinking good quality water, you are the center of your own universe. We have an entire system that is built around taking us away from that belief, whether it be the societal systems, the welfare systems, the religious systems, the political systems. All of that is basically designed to take away your power, to take away your own centeredness. But really, we are the seat of our own soul, and we have the ability to be infinitely powerful from this perspective. And if people can get to that point in any which way means, for me, it was through the equilibration process, and now I've built a process around that. And a lot of breakthrough processes will get you there, but it'll just get to a point where you feel empowered. And if you just live in that and live from that every day, then your life will be infinitely different.
Amazing. I love that. And I've got one more question for you. So anybody who takes a stage in, a metaphorical sense and a literal sense has to allow themselves to be seen at a level that I think is uncomfortable for most people. And, one of the biggest fears that most people have is public speaking. Which is hilarious. And my brain goes, it's so funny. It's so much fun. But, for a lot of people, that level of being seen is very intimidating. And so we have to, even if it does come kind of second nature to you, there's still elements of self that need to be confronted in the process of allowing yourself bigger and bigger stages, right? Or bigger and bigger audiences. What has that process or that journey been for you? And what was the turning point, or let me reword that. What was the last turning point that you went through around expanding that? And what's your current edge around it?
Again, I think I'm going to return to something you said, Nerida, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it was something about to be fully seen, you need to be completely invisible.
Yeah.
I loved when you said that, and it really reminded me of my back injury, because there was about 10 months where I couldn't really be seen. I was invisible. I couldn't really leave the house. I couldn't drive the car. I was laying down. There was a period for about 10 weeks where I couldn't really leave the yoga mat on the bedroom floor. And up until that point, although having facilitated, and spoken to over 1,000 people, I was wearing somewhat of a mask. I was wearing this, this mask of, yeah, I'm confident. Yeah, I've got this. Yeah, no worries. But it was eating away at me inside, and I ended up burning out in a big way, and having to take a massive contraction. So when that period where I was invisible, the amount that I developed within my psyche, and I sort of talk about it, it was my real initiation, my boy to man time. Everyone turns 18 and they think they're in the man, and then they travel the world, and then they think they turn into a man, and there's different phases. But for me, the needle still wasn't moving forward in my relationships. It wasn't moving forward in my business. It wasn't moving forward in my authenticity and getting my message out to the world, until I had that period of being invisible, where I had to go inward and develop a sense of resilience, a sense of compassion, a sense of, I guess, inner fortitude that I knew I could keep taking one step forward, and I didn't actually need my wider circles of people around me to be a part of that social network. So I had to almost pull back from the world in order to go through that upgrading phase. So
it's nearly like an experience of a lack of validation, isn't it?
yeah, it's incredibly humbling as well. When you're almost, and I think you talked about it in your story when it was sort of like you couldn't help the kids and you couldn't do what you wanted to do as a mum. And for me, I was just about to travel the world and do all these amazing things and start all these coaching programs, and it was like ripped from away from me. And what I found in that was and I basically said that there's no way I'm stepping in front of a camera or out on the stage again until I'm completely congruent with my message and grounded in who I am and centered in who I am. But that being said, all of it was necessary. I needed to have those. I needed to burn out. I needed to have the injury. I needed to have that realization. So anyone who is out there who actually wants to start sharing their message and get their face out there, then the best advice, and I know this is cliche, but it's just start. One of my clients was the same, and I said, look, what I want you to do is just in our chat, because we always have a running chat with all my clients. It's kind of like, just in our chat, you don't need to post it. Just do me a 1-minute video every day for a month, as if you were going to post it. And sure enough, 17 days in, he's like, I'm ready, let's go. And he started posting. It's just choosing environments where you do feel comfortable to be seen and to start being seen in them, and then slowly expand out the circle.
Yeah, I love that. And like for me, being seen or allowing yourself to be seen is absolutely paramount if you're wanting to do this work, right? If you're wanting to help people and if you are wanting to share a message with the world, it's absolutely paramount. And I think the same is said for building resourceful relationships, right? Coming into partnership with people, having authentic connections. It's the same recipe, right? Fully allowing yourself to be seen is so paramount in your ability to be intimate with another person and to be your authentic self, so that you are not questioning that age-old story of, oh yeah, but if they really knew who I was, would they still love me, right? Would they still want to be spending time with me, whatever. So it's such an interesting piece. And that's why I'm always curious as to the journey that people go on within allowing themselves to be seen on the different levels and layers, and obviously people who are moving onto stages, and it's an easy metaphor, I guess, as to how we've broken through that. But yeah, I really, really appreciate that. And I think one of the threads that I am noticing in that questioning, or in the answers to those questions, is a point of humbling where we are no longer able to strive for the same thing. Like, I think a lot of people who want to make a difference are driven by significance, and so the ability to be significant is taken away. I think, the people who are driven by connection, the ability of connection is taken away. It's like all of our vices from an emotional level and an identity level is kind of stripped back, and so that we understand that we're so much more than those things. And then you can just be all of it, right?
Absolutely.
Really, really fucking cool. Thank you so much for sharing. Really appreciate you. And so how do people get in touch? How do people follow you? What do you got coming up? Let us know.
Yeah, no. So JaimeDuff.com will be live shortly, but at the moment it's Journey with Jaime, journey.with.Jaime on Instagram. And that's where I'll be launching out the new coaching programs. I'm actually part of a pretty cool project called Start Over, and it's a co-author series. So I'll be writing a chapter which is specifically relating to my back injury and my whole journey around that, and how my start over moment within that, and what my biggest takeaways were. So that's going to be coming out later this year. I'll be as one of those volumes. So I'll be sharing more of that on my Instagram, on my social media. But yeah, feel free to reach out through Instagram, through Facebook. I can send you across the links and we can go from there.
Amazing. That would be fantastic. Well, thank you so much again for your time, and not just the time with me today, but the time that you spend in your offering. I've had the pleasure of knowing you for a while now and watching your journey, and I know that you live your work, and it's really important from my perspective to know people and to lean into people that are living the work rather than just tooting the horn. So thank you so much for the work that you do and for everything that you bring to the space.
Thank you, and same to yourself, Nora. It's amazing to see really stepping into it this year and talking to more people and helping more people and yeah, it's amazing. So thank you.
No problem. Okay, so that's it for us. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been my pleasure to have you here, and I just want to acknowledge you for spending the time to explore how to have more influence on your own life and be able to create the life that it is that you love. If you'd like to take this work further, you can do so by jumping onto my website at www.neridamills.com/masterclass and join me for my upcoming free 4-week masterclass, Time to Thrive. How to utilize your life as medicine to thrive. That's it from us. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.